Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of my video blog. I seem to have lost my Spidey hat this week. I really wanted to make it a part of my blog, but today we'll be reviewing a paper on corporate sustainability. And the name of the paper is Beyond the Business Case for Corporate Sustainability. And it's a paper that was published in 2002 by Thomas Dillick and Kai Hockerts. So, as the name of the paper suggests, it's a paper on corporate sustainability, and it gives you a brief overview on what corporate sustainability is, how did the idea kick off, and what are the different aspects of corporate sustainability that managers have to satisfy in order to achieve that sustainability title, to say effectively that, hey, my company is sustainable. So, starting off, the paper describes how the idea of corporate sustainability kicked off. It refers to the World Summit or the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, where the idea of sustainability really kicked off, and it was picked up by different groups, different stakeholders like the public, the NGO, the governments, etc., and how the different governments tried to incorporate sustainability in their own local agenda. For example, in the UK, when Tony Blair started off what is known as the Local Agenda 21, where each city was asked to report how it could be more sustainable. But however, the main focus of this introduction is the formation of the WBSCD, which is basically the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So the WBCSD was formed right after the Earth Summit, and it was formed by a group of business leaders who said, okay, this has gone on very far. Now we have to become more sustainable. And in order to become sustainable, what are the different criteria that we have to satisfy? The WBCSD is right now a group of 150 different corporations all around the world, big and small, that are trying to strive. They're trying to achieve the same goal for corporate sustainability. So, what the WBCSD essentially said is, in order to achieve sustainability, they followed the exact same Brundtland definitions. They said, okay, we have to be sustainable on the economic front, we have to be sustainable on the social and the ecological front. So it's as you know, the standard triple bottom line approach. But what was seen through this paper and through the different literature reviews that was done in order to write this paper, mainly managers in corporations and organizations are not really focusing on the ecological or the social aspects. They transfer everything into the economic aspect, which they say, okay, this is the social aspect. Say, for example, you take a worker in a group, okay, the worker, you give him a wage. That they transfer to an economic aspect. What the worker does with the wage, it really doesn't matter. And as for the ecological aspect, they look at eco-efficiency. And like we all know, eco-efficiency is very narrow. It's a very narrow definition of achieving ecological sustainability. They only look at, okay, so I have this many resources, I have harmed the environment by this much factor in order to retrieve this many resources, and what is the most efficient way that I can use these resources and really mitigate my environmental footprint? Well, this is not the best way to see sustainability. All they're looking at is how to mitigate or how to minimize their environmental footprint by achieving the most efficient use of their resources. So everything is basically translated into an economic benefit, which is really not the best way to look at sustainability or to view corporate sustainability. So what this paper further goes on to mention are the different types of capital. So let's take, for example, the triple bottom line approach: economic, social, and environmental. Within the economic capital, you can think of economic capital of a firm as its assets versus its liabilities. Okay, what are my assets? How much cash do I have? And what are my liabilities? What is my debt? But however, that is not the entire definition of an economic capital. You can't just look at economic capital as the assets versus liabilities. You also have to take into account things like fixed assets, and you have to take into account the most important thing, which are intangible assets. So for example, you look at a firm's reputation, you look at a firm's intellectual properties, things like that. All those things have to be taken into account. Again, when people are defining economic sustainability, all they're looking at in corporations are their assets versus their liabilities. That's not entirely true, because you have all these intangible factors coming in as well. So for example, if a firm says, okay, I have gone bankrupt, I don't have any money, hence my economic sustainability is zero. Well, in that case, the economic sustainability must have been, or might have been, zero way before the firm went bankrupt. They might have stopped producing. They might have stopped innovating. Not producing, they might have stopped innovating. They might have stopped taking into consideration what their brand image was. All those stopped a long time ago before they went bankrupt. So their economic sustainability stopped way before they became bankrupt. Looking at social capital is again defined as two different capitals. You have the social capital, which is quite straightforward. The social capital is basically people's wages, how happy the workers are the workers loyal to the company, organization. Um, but again, social capital is also considered in terms of society. So, what is the societal capital? So, if a firm bases itself in a particular neighborhood or in a particular society, what are the services that it is providing the society? Is it providing employment to a large number of people in the society? Is it providing any public service? Is it providing any cultural events or cultural advances to the society? Is it allowing the society to grow in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, and things like that? So when you talk about social sustainability or the social aspects of corporate sustainability, you have to take into account the social capital as well as the societal capital. And finally, if we look at the environmental aspect of corporate sustainability, again, that is divided into two different factors. The one that is most obvious are natural resources. So natural resources is basically, okay, how much wood am I using, or what kind of how much fish am I using, things like that. Just natural resources that you take from the surrounding environment. But at the same time, you have to also look at environmental services. So what are environmental services? Say, for example, you're a paper producing company and you're cutting down trees in the Amazon forest. Well, your natural resource is the tree. But what kind of ecological services are you taking away from the world by cutting down the tree? The tree absorbs or sequesters carbon dioxide, so it allows for climate mitigation. You're taking away that service. The tree allows or provides habitats for many different species of animals, so you're reducing biodiversity. The tree is also an important part of the culture or for the indigenous tribes in the Amazon forest. So you're taking away basically their home. So these are the ecological services that you're taking away. So when you talk about environmental sustainability or the environmental factor of the triple bottom line approach, you have to consider the natural resources as well as the ecological services that you're taking away. So in terms of the economical aspect, the social aspect, and the environmental aspect, this paper basically divides each aspect into two different types of capitals that corporations have to take into account in order to be sustainable. Another thing that this paper really nails it on is basically the look of firms for short-term gains versus long-term achievements. So due to the discount rate and how the market works, how the free market economy or any economy for that matter works, people only look at short-term gains. What can I do to satisfy my stakeholders right now? They're not looking at long-term achievements. They're not looking at, okay, if I do this and this down the road, 30, 40 years down the line, this is the positive impact that my corporation will have on the surrounding environment. No one's looking at that. They're only looking at the short term gain, and this is because of the current interest rate or the current opportunity cost in the market. Corporate sustainability can be derived or it can be defined by the Brundtland definition. Corporate sustainability can be said to be satisfying the current stakeholders without taking away any opportunity cost from the future stakeholders. Corporations are not following this. They're only looking at short-term gains. And what really happens when you follow these short-term gains are things like irreversibility. You can't reverse your effects. So for example, if you're transferring everything to an economic gain, if you're transferring, again, I'll take the example of that tree in the Amazon. If you're transferring that tree into an economic gain, okay, I can use that tree, I can produce 5 sheets of paper. So that tree is equal to 5 sheets of paper and however much 5 sheets of paper might give you in the market. If you're transferring some things into an economical gain, especially social and environmental factors, it really doesn't help because then that tree is also providing many environmental services that you cannot replenish. You are not helping in order to mitigate climate change. You're not helping to reestablish biodiversity. Once those things are taken away, there's no way to reverse those. So it's really important to understand that everything cannot be seen in terms of economics. Everything cannot be seen in terms of money. You also have to take into account the ability for nature to replenish itself. You also have to take into account the irreversibility factor that you cannot provide back into the system. So it's really interesting how this paper goes into a lot of details, and finally what it ends up in is are the different definitions of how or what the corporations can do in order to achieve sustainability. So when you're talking about eco-efficiency, okay, so if you're looking at an eco-efficiency factor, if you're looking at, for example, say an energy efficient car, energy efficient cars, yes, hybrids, things like that, they require 70 to 80% less energy to go on. You don't really need to burn that much fossil fuel, which at the end reduces the cost for the customers because they don't have to buy gas anymore. However, if you look at what the car is to a customer, so for example, if a customer buys an energy efficient car, it is cheaper. So in that case, the number of cars in the world will double or triple or however you want to see it. Even though it's cheaper and even though it's more efficient, because it is cheaper, people will buy more of that. So the overall impact on the environment is very large. You're producing a lot of CO2. Even though that is eco-efficient, you're achieving economic efficiency, you're using less resources to provide the same service, you are overall as a system you're increasing the burden on the environment, and that's not a good thing. So you have to look at eco-effectiveness, not eco-efficiency. How effective is your solution for the environmental factors? Scan the surrounding environment. Does the surrounding environment have the carrying capacity to implement your innovation? So you have to look at, for example, the overall impact on CO2. What is the carbon footprint of your innovation? You can't just look at efficiency, you have to look at effectiveness. At the same time, if you're looking at the social aspects of sustainability, socio efficiency, again, for example, if you're providing workers with a wage, the workers are happy, they're good, they're loyal to you, but how effective is it to the entire society? You're only looking at a very small group of people, only people working for the company. So for example, this paper uses the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry, it provides a lot of good services for people who can afford the services. They're not looking at the sea of people around them. They're not looking at the poor countries where it might be difficult for people to purchase the specific pharmaceuticals, to purchase the specific medicine. So in that case, social effectiveness is defined as the people or the social gains that you're achieving in a broader range, in a broader population. So you can't just look at socio efficiency, you can't just look at the people in your corporation, you have to get a broader view, you have to look at the socio effectiveness, how your corporation is affecting the surrounding environment or the surrounding society. And finally, the paper talks about things like sufficiency. So some things are not within the company's grasp. Some things such as consumer demand. Even though you're producing a very efficient car, it uses less fossil fuel, the consumer demand might shift. People might be looking at SUVs more just because they're more attractive. So even though you're producing an efficient product, people don't want it because they're looking at a different thing. The market has changed. So what the paper goes on to say is that whatever you do as a company, the market might shift, and this is denoted in the term sufficiency. The customers or the consumers might not find your product sufficient enough for their own needs. So sufficiency has to be also taken into account in order to achieve corporate sustainability. So you're keeping up with the market trends and helping to improve the products or whatever the market trend is in order to make it more sustainable. So those are the different concepts that the paper talks about. So it talks about eco-efficiency and eco-effectiveness, socio-efficiency and socio-effectiveness, economic, social, and environmental capital, and finally it talks about sufficiency and things like that. So it's quite an interesting paper. I found it to be a real eye-opener, and it really helps with the examples as well. It gives you lots of different examples. Unfortunately, for me to describe every single one of those examples, it'll take a long time. So I really gave you a few specific examples, but if you're interested, again, I put the reference of the paper at the beginning of this video. So hopefully you'll read the paper and enjoy it as much as I did. So thanks, guys, and I'll see you next week.